My beloved child, there are moments when something shifts behind closed doors before the world around you has any idea it happened. Quietly, without warning, without permission, and yet somehow, your spirit feels it before your eyes ever see proof. That uneasy silence you could not explain, that strange distance in the air when certain names were mentioned, that sudden awareness that someone had been moving differently around you, it was not your imagination. You were sensing the ripple of something hidden. Because while you were trying to understand why the energy around you felt unfamiliar, someone was making decisions in secret, decisions they believed would erase your place from a story they never had the power to control. Listen carefully now, because what happened was not done loudly. There was no confrontation, no dramatic announcement, no open confession. It happened in silence, the kind of silence people use when they know what they are doing would never survive the light. A signature, a decision, a quiet agreement made behind walls where they assumed your name would never be spoken again. They thought if they handled it privately enough, if they moved carefully enough, if they disguised their intentions beneath polite smiles and carefully chosen words, then you would remain unaware while your position slowly disappeared. But here is what they did not understand. Some removals are attempted only because your presence carries more weight than they can bear. Think about that for a moment. People do not secretly work to erase what means nothing. They do not strategize against what has no impact. They do not move in silence against what carries no influence. The very fact that someone felt compelled to operate behind your back reveals something deeper than betrayal. It reveals significance. It reveals that your place in this story was never small. It reveals that your existence in their world disrupted something they could not control. And some people, when they cannot control what your presence awakens, try to remove the source instead. Don't skip, because this is where many misunderstand what is truly happening. What looked like rejection may have been resistance. What felt like sudden distance may have been interference. What seemed like someone pulling away from you without explanation may have been the result of conversations, pressure, and carefully planted narratives taking place far from your sight. Not because you lacked value, not because you failed, but because someone somewhere decided your presence was too meaningful to leave untouched. And the one who signed that paper, whatever form it took in their world, believed they were finalizing something. They believed one quiet action could rewrite your place. They believed hidden decisions carried the same power as destiny. They believed that if they acted before truth surfaced, they could shape the outcome before anyone noticed what had changed. But hidden things have a strange way of trembling before they collapse. That is why the atmosphere around this has started to shift. You may have noticed it already. A tension that wasn't there before. A nervousness in people who once seemed certain. Subtle changes in tone. Hesitation where confidence used to live. Because what was signed in secret did not bring the peace they expected. It did not secure the outcome they imagined. Instead, it created pressure. Internal pressure. The kind that builds when someone realizes their private actions may not stay private forever. Because secrecy always carries weight. And the heavier the secret, the harder it becomes to hold. Something important is waiting for you in this truth. The very people who thought they had quietly altered your future are beginning to understand that what was done in darkness has consequences in light. Not dramatic consequences. Not revenge. Not destruction. Something far more unsettling for them than that. Exposure. Clarity. Recognition. The slow unraveling of carefully maintained appearances. Because eventually, people reveal themselves by the things they thought no one would ever find out. And when that realization begins to settle in, fear enters their certainty. But let me tell you something deeper than the secret itself. This was never just about removing you. No, the paper, the signature, the hidden agreement, that was surface level. Beneath it was something more personal, more emotional, more fragile. The real motive was not paperwork, it was fear. Fear of what your presence represented. Fear of the connection you created. Fear of the influence you carried without trying. Fear that someone else saw something in you they could not compete with. Fear that if left alone, your place would become undeniable. So they intervened. Quietly, strategically, carefully, not because they were powerful, but because they were afraid. And people who act from fear often mistake temporary control for permanent victory. They forget something essential. Forced distance does not erase real connection. Manipulation does not create peace. And hidden interference cannot permanently replace what is genuine. Stay till the end, because this next truth may explain more than you realize. The reason this situation has weighed on your spirit so heavily is because part of you sensed that what was changing around you did not match the truth of what you felt. You knew something was off. You knew the energy did not align. You knew the reactions, the distance, the confusion. It all felt unnatural, as if pieces had been moved without your knowledge. You questioned yourself, wondered if you were overthinking. Wondered if maybe you had imagined the connection, the importance, the meaning of your place. You did not imagine it. You were detecting disruption. And now, the disruption is beginning to crack. Because the problem with secret decisions is this: once reality starts moving in a different direction than the one people planned, panic begins. The one who thought a signature would end your involvement is slowly realizing something uncomfortable. Despite every effort made to push you aside, your presence still remains. Your name still lingers. Your influence still echoes. Your absence itself has become louder than they expected. That is what unsettles them most. They thought removing you would create silence. Instead, it created questions. Questions in the mind of the person they were trying to influence. Questions in the room when your name still comes up unexpectedly. Questions in quiet moments when things no longer feel right without you there. Questions that no paper can answer and no hidden agreement can suppress. Because some people only understand your value after they help create the void your absence leaves behind. And that void has begun speaking, not with words, but with realization. Realization that something important was interfered with. Realization that certain decisions may have been made under pressure, persuasion, or incomplete truth. Realization that what was presented behind closed doors may not match reality at all. This is why the energy is changing now. Not because everything has already been revealed, but because awareness has begun. And awareness is the first crack in every false narrative. The one who signed in secret may still be pretending everything is under control. They may still wear calm on the outside. They may still act as though their actions were justified, unnoticed, secure. But beneath that surface, they are watching, listening, wondering if someone knows, wondering if the truth is getting closer. Wondering why the outcome they expected has not arrived. Because they thought secrecy guaranteed success. It never did. It only delayed truth. And truth, when delayed, tends to arrive all at once. So if lately you have felt the urge to react, to chase answers, to force explanations, to demand clarity from people who refuse to speak plainly, resist that urge for now. Not because your questions are invalid, but because some truths reveal themselves more powerfully when left enough space to surface naturally. Forced confessions create partial truths. Pressure creates defensive lies. But time exposes what people cannot keep carrying forever. Especially when their own choices begin turning against them. And something tells me, that moment is approaching faster than anyone expected. Because there is a person connected to all of this who has started noticing inconsistencies. Quietly, internally, piece by piece. They are replaying conversations, re-examining decisions, remembering details they once ignored, feeling that strange discomfort that comes when someone begins to suspect they were guided by a version of events that was never complete. That discomfort is not random. It is awakening. And when someone awakens to manipulation, their first response is often silence. Not because nothing is happening, because everything is. They go quiet when they are connecting dots. They withdraw when they are reassessing trust. They become distant when they are privately realizing that what they believed may have been shaped for them. Which means if the person at the center of this has seemed quieter lately, more thoughtful, more uncertain than usual, do not mistake that for indifference. Sometimes silence is what happens right before someone sees everything clearly, and when that clarity arrives, the paper signed in secret may no longer matter the way they thought it would, because documents can influence decisions. They cannot control truth. They cannot rewrite authenticity. They cannot permanently erase what was real. But before that unraveling fully begins, there is one more thing you need to understand. The one who moved against you did not expect resistance from within. They expected the person they influenced to accept everything at face value, to trust without question, to proceed without reflection, to follow the path laid before them without ever stopping to ask whether the road itself had been manipulated. They underestimated what genuine connection leaves behind. Because genuine connection leaves traces. It leaves memory. It leaves intuition. It leaves a lingering sense that something about the separation never made sense. And once that feeling takes hold, people start searching for answers. Very soon, someone will begin asking the questions they were never supposed to ask. Very soon, details thought buried will resurface. Very soon, the silence protecting this secret will become harder to maintain. And when that happens, everything shifts. But the first person shaken by the truth may not be who you expect, because the one who signed that paper is already feeling the ground move beneath them. And they know something is coming. Part 2 waits where the first crack becomes impossible to hide. There is a moment in every hidden story when the person who caused the silence begins to fear the sound of it. And that is exactly where this has reached now. The one who once moved with confidence, who believed their quiet decision would remain untouched, has started noticing something they did not prepare for. The plan may have been executed in secret, yes, but secrets become heavier when reality refuses to cooperate with them. Because despite everything they arranged, despite the careful wording, the private conversations, the calculated timing, the outcome is not unfolding the way they promised themselves it would. Something still feels unfinished. Something still feels unresolved. And the person they thought would simply move on, has not moved on in the way they expected. That is the part no one told them about you. Your absence was supposed to create forgetting. Instead, it created reflection. The distance they engineered was supposed to weaken what existed. Instead, it made its value more visible. The separation they forced was supposed to close a chapter. Instead, it left someone staring at the empty space where your presence used to be, wondering why peace never followed your departure. That question is becoming impossible to ignore now, because people can be persuaded for a while. But they cannot be convinced forever when their lived reality keeps contradicting what they were told. Think about that carefully. When someone is warned away from a person they deeply cared about, but life feels worse after that person disappears, doubt begins. Quietly at first, just a thought here and there, a strange memory returning unexpectedly, a comparison between what was promised and what actually followed. Then another thought, then another, until eventually the mind can no longer avoid the question, what if I was not told the full truth? That question has entered the room. And once it enters, everything changes. Do not underestimate how powerful one moment of doubt can be in the mind of someone who trusted the wrong voice. One contradiction is all it takes to unravel months of influence. One inconsistency can cause someone to revisit every conversation they once accepted without hesitation. One emotional realization can force them to examine everything from the beginning. And that process has already started. There are memories resurfacing now that were buried beneath confusion. Specific moments, specific words, things they overlooked at the time because they were listening through the lens someone else handed them. But now? Now those same memories feel different. Now they are replaying events and noticing details they missed. Tone, timing, reactions, strange urgency, odd pressure. The way certain narratives were pushed too aggressively. The way your name was always discussed with unusual intensity. The way every road seemed designed to lead them away from you before they had enough time to think for themselves. That pattern is no longer invisible. And the one who orchestrated it can feel that. You may not see it outwardly yet, but behind their composed appearance is growing instability. They are watching more closely than before, monitoring moods, testing conversations, trying to gauge whether suspicion has formed, listening for subtle changes in tone, searching faces for signs that the truth may be approaching. Because when someone knows they built their position on half-truths, they become terrified the moment full truth starts rising. Don't skip, because the next part matters more than it seems. The person at the center of this, whether they have spoken yet or not, is entering a phase of emotional conflict. A difficult one, because realizing you may have been manipulated is not a simple revelation. It is painful. It forces someone to confront the possibility that they misjudged a situation, that they trusted someone who did not deserve it, that they may have participated in pushing away someone who never actually deserved the distance placed between them. That kind of realization does not arrive lightly. It shakes pride. It challenges ego. It forces painful self-reflection. And often, before someone admits that truth outwardly, they wrestle with it privately. So if they have gone quieter than usual, if their energy feels conflicted, if they seem emotionally unsettled without explanation, understand this. Sometimes the most important inner battles happen in complete silence. Because clarity is rarely loud at first. It begins as discomfort, then suspicion, then reflection, then truth. And once truth fully lands, nothing returns to how it was. What makes this even more significant is that the one who interfered may try to tighten their grip now that they sense control slipping. This is common. When manipulators feel the story changing, they often become more active, not less, more persuasive, more emotional, more dramatic, more desperate to reinforce the narrative before it collapses. They may suddenly increase their influence, push harder, speak more urgently, revisit old accusations, create new distractions. Anything to keep attention away from the one thing they fear most, independent thought. Because the moment someone starts thinking for themselves, manipulation begins to die. And that moment is near. Something important is waiting for you here. The truth does not always emerge through confrontation. Sometimes it emerges through contrast. Through someone observing behavior that no longer matches the story they were sold. Through patterns becoming too obvious to ignore. Through the very person who lied revealing their nature by overplaying their hand. And that may be exactly what is happening now. The one who signed in secret may become so determined to maintain control that they begin exposing themselves without realizing it. Their urgency may become suspicious. Their insistence may feel unnatural. Their repeated attempts to shape perception may raise more questions than answers. What once passed as concern may now feel like control. What once sounded protective may now sound possessive. What once appeared helpful may now appear calculated. And the more they push, the more visible their motives become. This is how false stories collapse, not all at once, but through 1,000 small cracks appearing where certainty once stood. And somewhere in the middle of those cracks, your truth is being reconsidered. Not because you forced it. Not because you defended yourself endlessly. Not because you chased people for understanding. But because reality itself has started contradicting the lie. That is the most powerful kind of vindication. When the truth becomes undeniable without you needing to announce it. Still, I know part of you has wondered whether too much damage was done. Whether what happened behind the scenes changed things permanently. Whether the secret decisions, the interference, the distance, altered the story beyond repair. Listen closely. Delayed does not mean destroyed. Interrupted does not mean ended. Misled does not mean lost forever. Sometimes what appears broken is simply being forced through a painful moment of revelation before it can be rebuilt honestly. And honesty is approaching, because there is a conversation coming. One not planned by the person who tried to erase you. A conversation they cannot fully control. A moment where questions will be asked that were never meant to be asked. A moment where someone finally stops accepting surface explanations and starts digging deeper. That conversation may begin subtly. A simple question. A quiet challenge. A request for clarification. But beneath that moment will be something much bigger. The first open sign that trust in the false narrative is cracking. And when trust cracks, panic follows. The one who interfered knows this. That is why their composure is becoming harder to maintain. That is why their energy has changed. That is why even if they appear calm, internally they are preparing for the possibility that the very story they built is about to turn against them. Because if the person they influence discovers the truth, then they will not only question what happened to you. Every warning, every accusation, every emotional appeal, every concern that suddenly feels strategic in hindsight, and perhaps most painfully of all, they will question the person they trusted. That realization carries consequences no secret signature can prevent. Because once trust is broken in that way, rebuilding it becomes far harder than breaking it ever was. So while you may have felt unseen during this process, while you may have wondered whether anyone would ever realize what happened behind the curtain, understand this. Recognition is closer than it appears. Not loud recognition. Not dramatic vindication. Something deeper. The kind that changes perception permanently. The kind that makes someone look back and say, I understand now. And when they understand, they will not only see what was done to you, they will see who did it. And that may become the turning point no one was prepared for. Because in part 3, the person who believed the lie begins confronting the pieces that no longer fit, and the first direct sign of truth starts surfacing where it can no longer be ignored. Something shifts in a person the moment confusion turns into pattern recognition. At first they question one detail, then another, and suddenly what once looked like isolated moments begin forming a shape they cannot unsee. That is where this story is moving now. The person who was influenced against you is no longer just feeling uneasy. They are beginning to recognize that too many things happened in ways that no longer make sense. Too many conversations carried the same strange urgency. Too many warnings felt rehearsed. Too many decisions were encouraged before they had time to reflect. And now, piece by piece, the image is becoming clear enough to disturb them. Because when someone starts noticing manipulation after trusting it for so long, their entire emotional world begins to rearrange. They replay everything. They revisit every warning they accepted. They remember the moments when they felt pressured but ignored their own discomfort. They think about the times your character was questioned in ways that now feel strangely convenient. And then comes the realization that changes everything. Someone may have worked harder to keep you apart than anyone should have if their intentions were truly innocent. That thought alone can shake a person, because it forces them to ask a painful question they never wanted to face. Why was someone so determined to remove this person from my life? Not distance. Not caution. Remove. That difference matters. Because concern sounds different than control. Protection feels different than possession. Guidance feels different than interference. And now those differences are becoming impossible for them to ignore. Don't skip, because this is where the first visible sign begins. There is likely going to be a moment, small on the surface, enormous underneath, when they hear something, see something, or learn something that directly contradicts what they were told about you. It may seem minor to anyone else. A detail spoken casually. A fact revealed unintentionally. A piece of information surfacing from someone who did not realize its significance. But to the person piecing this together, it will hit like lightning. Because that one contradiction will confirm what their intuition has been whispering. If this part was untrue, what else was? That question opens doors that cannot easily be closed again. And once someone starts evaluating a lie, they rarely stop at one. They go back through everything. Every statement gets re-examined. Every motive gets reconsidered. Every emotional reaction gets reassessed. And eventually, the entire structure built against you starts looking less like truth and more like strategy. That realization is painful, because understanding manipulation means also understanding one's own role in allowing it. The person awakening to this may feel guilt, deep guilt, not only for what was done to you, but for the fact that they participated in distance, silence, or misunderstanding while believing they were doing the right thing. That is not easy to process. Which is why do not be surprised if their first reaction is not immediate action. Sometimes when truth arrives, people go inward before they move outward. They become quiet because shame enters the room. They hesitate because pride is fighting with regret. They delay because admitting the truth means admitting they may have been wrong. But even delayed realization is still realization. And once seen, it cannot be unseen. Meanwhile, the one who moved against you is beginning to sense the atmosphere changing more clearly than ever. The conversations are not as easy to steer now. The trust they once relied on feels less automatic. Their words are no longer accepted with the same certainty. Subtle resistance has entered the dynamic. Questions are being asked where obedience once existed. Pauses are appearing where agreement used to come quickly. That is how control slips. Not through dramatic rebellion. Through hesitation. Through doubt. Through people beginning to think instead of simply react. And when a manipulator notices someone thinking independently, panic sharpens. They may start behaving differently now. More emotional. More reactive. More defensive over things that once seemed casual. You may even hear that your name is suddenly being mentioned more than before. Not because you have done anything, but because people who fear losing control often obsess over the person they can no longer erase. Your presence has become a threat again, not because you are doing anything loudly, because truth is moving without your help. Something important is waiting for you in that reality. Your silence may have done more than arguments ever could. By not forcing yourself into rooms where you were misunderstood, by not chasing validation from those determined not to give it, by allowing space to exist where your absence could be felt, you created the very contrast needed for truth to emerge. Because once the noise settled, people were left alone with outcomes. And outcomes tell the truth louder than explanations ever can. They were told removing you would create peace. Did it? They were told distance from you was necessary. Was it? They were told the problem would disappear once you were gone. Did it? When reality answers no enough times, lies collapse under their own weight. And now someone is sitting with that realization, quietly, deeply, wondering how they failed to see it sooner, wondering what your silence really meant, wondering whether your withdrawal was not indifference, but pain, wondering how much this cost you. That empathy is the beginning of everything changing. Because once someone stops viewing you through another person's narrative and starts imagining your experience directly, compassion enters where judgment once lived. And compassion has a way of reopening doors pride once closed. But before any reconciliation, before any confession, before any direct acknowledgement, there will likely be one more phase. Observation. They will watch. They will listen. They will test what they now suspect against what they continue to see. They will observe the behavior of the one who lied. They will pay closer attention to tone, reactions, inconsistencies, possessiveness, defensiveness. And what they observe may confirm far more than words ever could. Because manipulative people often expose themselves when they realize they are being watched more carefully. They become less polished, less patient, less convincing. Their frustration leaks through. Their need for control becomes visible. And the person awakening to truth begins seeing not just what happened to you, but who this person really is. That is when perception changes permanently. Because discovering a lie is one thing, discovering the character of the liar is another. And once both become clear, there is no returning to blind trust. So if you have felt lately like something is building behind the scenes, you are not wrong. If you have sensed movement even without proof, you are not imagining it. If your spirit keeps telling you that hidden things are shifting, listen. Because the story is no longer frozen. It is turning, quietly, irreversibly. And soon, someone who once believed everything they were told will no longer be able to pretend they do.